A very good day to all you patriots. I am Captain John Paul Jones, here again with another story from our Young Patriots book. This week's tale is entitled Thanks Be by Marcella Fisher Anderson. Now, I quite enjoyed this story as it deals a bit with my area of expertise, seafaring. So I hope you'll enjoy just as well. Ben pushed aside the salt grass that was almost as tall as he was. The October sun was rising over the York River. To the north, smoke from the British Army's breakfast fires drifted above the Yorktown encampment. Recognising loud rumblings from the south, Ben knew that the Americans and French were positioning heavy guns for another bombardment. He hurried to the river, thinking about the flounder that he would catch for the supper menu at his aunt's tavern on the road to Williamsburg. He wondered whether Rodney, a young British drummer he had met one day at Water's Edge, would be waiting for him. He imagined Rodney's eyes crinkling in a smile as he spoke. "I say, Ben, knew you'd come. Time to take the boat out." But when Ben reached the water's edge, a cut rope lay at his feet, and his boat, always tied to the willow, was gone. Ben shaded his eyes. Not far up the river, he spotted his dory, stranded on the sandbar, and someone in a British uniform standing up in it, pushing off with an oar. "Stop!" Ben shouted. "That's my boat!" As Ben got closer, he recognised the boatman. It was the drummer. "Rodney, what are you doing? I thought we were friends," he said. A cold finger of betrayal crossed Ben's heart. "Didn't I trust you? I taught you how to trap rabbits and catch flounder and keep it fresh in the sand, didn't I?" Rodney didn't respond. Fiercely now, his gangling frame bent to the task, Rodney worked to the boat free and rowed rapidly toward the encampment. Ben stared, then began running again. Around the bend, he saw the other stolen craft was clustered at the river's entrance. A portly British officer stood, ordering his boats ashore. Ben ducked down in the grass. He sat on the bank, arms clasped around his trembling knees. He knew that the wind had blown his words away. For Rodney's sake, he was grateful that Rodney hadn't been caught befriending an American. Ben had heard that British Army discipline was swift and cruel for anyone who spoke with the enemy or slipped away from camp. 50 lashes at least, with a cat-o'-nine-tails whip. In a mood as heavy as the clouds darkening the sky, Ben returned empty-handed to the tavern where he lived with his Aunt Martha. For supper, he picked carrots and onions from the garden, added water to the cabbage soup, and served a few customers. A gusting wind blew through the door each time it was opened. Before he went to bed, he latched the casement windows. Ben awoke to a bombardment that shook the smoke-blackened walls and rattled Aunt Martha's best china. He hurried into the tap room just as 2 customers came in for breakfast. Their Continental Army coats were tattered and frayed. One man pressed a damp cloth to his forehead. A black patch covered one eye. "Worst shelling I've ever heard," he said hoarsely. "Tried to escape the siege lines last night, the British did," said the other man. "Crossed the York River to Gloucester Point." Limping, he pulled back a chair. A squall caught them. Most of the boats were scattered. Only a few are back now. "Baked eggs and cider, if you please." Ben rushed through his work and left before his aunt could think of more chores for him to do. He ran toward the American siege lines, tearing through fields of goldenrod. Panicked quail fled toward him. Distant bells rang 10 o'clock. Out on the York River, the topsails of French ships stretched across the water. The British were in a box and couldn't escape. Ben could see that. He squinted, focusing his eyes on the battered British fortifications. Suddenly, a British drummer stood on top of a wall. Ben ran closer. The boom of cannon shook the sandy ground beneath his feet. A British ensign held up a large white cloth, waved it above his head, and walked down the embankment, following the drummer. Was it Rodney beating the drum? In a minute, Ben was sure of it. He recognised the lanky build, the sunburned face. The American and French gunners kept up their steady, accurate fire. Afraid for Rodney, Ben cried, "Stop! Stop firing!" Steadily, Rodney and the other officer walked closer to the American lines, moving in and out to the billowing smoke. Then the British ensign's flag seen at last. The cannonading stopped. A light breeze wafted the smoke away. An American officer walked forward to meet them. Rodney had stopped drumming and held the sticks stiffly at his side. As if in a dream, Ben watched the British officer and Rodney vanish into the American headquarters. Minutes later, without even remembering having run, he burst into the tavern. "Flag of truce," he shouted. "Flag of truce!" An old man standing by the hearth turned around and dropped his clay pipe. "Say that again, lad," he demanded. "They're meeting right now in American headquarters," Ben's voice croaked. "I've seen them." The room was silent. "Listen," said the man with the eye patch. "The guns have stopped." Aunt Martha set down a pot of oyster stew. She covered her mouth, then clasped her hands together. "Thanks be to God," she said. "Thanks be." At once the men stood up. They swept aside their pewter mugs, sending them clattering in all directions. The tavern emptied. During the hours that followed, Ben was too busy serving happy and cheering customers to think much about the American victory. But 2 days later, on the afternoon of the formal surrender proceedings, he walked to Yorktown with Aunt Martha. Ben noted that she had pinned 2 yellow garden dahlias to her shawl. Later, Ben smiled as he remembered the British rifles stacked high against the sky and the British effort to save face by trying to present the surrender sword to the French instead of the Americans. Then Ben caught sight of Rodney, marching off to prison, beating a doleful surrender on his drum, averting his eyes as he passed by. It was a long and lonely week before Ben went back to the river. Only a few bald eagles soared above. It was the early morning light, and he followed a newly broken trail through the tall grass. When he parted it, he gasped at seeing his boat tied to the willow. He peered inside. 2 drumsticks lay at the bottom. Rodney! Could he have escaped while on his march to prison? Ben grinned. Rodney was good at that. Perhaps he had escaped to live off the land as Ben had taught him, until he could become a farmer or a shopkeeper. He could almost hear Rodney say again, "There's nothing for me in England, and I hate the British Army, I do. I'm staying here to be a new American." His blue eyes darkened as he added, "Bloody well see if I don't." Now, spotting a branch stuck upright in a mound of sand, Ben dug into it to uncover a flounder, newly caught and buried in the cool shore. He wrenched the fish in the river. The morning light shone on the scales, and Ben, holding Rodney's flounder aloft, laughed out loud. Well, I must say, amongst a war that has a nasty habit of tearing family and friends apart, it is refreshing to see a story of a friendship forming between a patriot and a British soldier. Honestly, I have to say, I myself can relate quite a bit with the character of Rodney, as I myself was a former British with dreams of joining the Royal Navy. So, nice to see there are others out there like me. I thank you very much for your time once again, and I hope to see you real soon.